এই জায়গা থেকে অবশ্যই
So, so from cell divisions, I was cell biology. And now the second questions, this is write in short about the phases of fertilization and write down the formation of notochord and name the neural tube defects with their time of occurrence. Here you have to see the marks distributions as first first part of this term, that is 3 plus 2 plus 2. So write specifically and not write unnecessary details. So here the phases of fertilization, you know there are 3 phases. If you here must, as mentioned here, use diagram. So in diagram you mention that, so you show diagram and write about the in short about the each 3 phases. Then formation of the notochord, 3 marks, and you write how notochord is formed, only that, and the neural tube defects and time of occurrence in relation to that, that spina bifida anencephaly, when it happens and which part of the tube involves. So write about that in short. Now, so from these questions I feel that it's come from the general embryology. And here if we say the general embryology, here prenatal periods and postnatal maturity and development growth, you have to know about that. And individually the changes that takes place in the first week of development, second week of development, third week of development, embryonic period and fetal period, and you have to know about that. And clinical aspects also you have to know. So here some diagram are there, already we taught you in our classes, and in we say about details about that, what are the what changes takes place in the first week of development. So when first it starts from fertilizations to implantations, so here implantation, fertilization, morula, about that you know, you have to know, and you have to know details. And for before that, gametogenesis, so individually oogenesis and spermatogenesis and spermiogenesis, this is also important for your uh, presence knowledge. And this third questions here given, name the connective tissue cell with one function of each. Here question is very specific and it is also specific. So it coming from the general histology. So you know general histology already start from the epithelial tissues, then connective tissue, muscular tissue and nervous tissue. So general aspects of this you have to know, and the questions actually come from here, general histology. And now, and the second portion, that write down 3 histological difference between various type of muscle in tabulated form, it also come from the general histology. So here you write about the histological difference, that is how many nucleus, what their positions, their shape, have striation or not. In that way you have to details, you have to write in details about that. And he must use figure in here to differentiate it among these muscles. So marks distribution here 4 plus 3. So individually I feel uh, connective tissue cells, that is fibroblast, and some are free cells, some are fixed cells. So if you I feel if you show individuals individually in figure, the mentions the cells and their shapes, positions and the location of the nucleus and function individually, so it's very important here for this. And the fourth question, that is write down the characteristics features of synovial joint And the second portion, give the artery supply of growing long bone with use diagram and write about the functional end artery. So here the characteristics feature of synovial joint, and whole questions actually coming from the general anatomy of joint and vessels and also from bone. So you have to know in details about that. And first of all, here the if we say if I say that you have to know about the definition of joint, classification of joint, that is classification of joint as synovial joint, cartilaginous joint and fibrous joint, and each individual joint have their individual classifications with examples. So you have to know about that for your knowledge. And and if the question will be come, and these questions in in several times come in different way, so this is important. And the subsequent period of the embryology here, from general embryology, write down the formation of the placenta in short. You know the placenta have fetal part and maternal part, and each part ultimately forming the placenta. So you have to know how placenta is formed, and here what the changes place takes place in the syncyto and trophoblast, and this ultimately help to formation placental villi. So you have to know about that and write down the sites of ectopic pregnancy. If pregnancy is not continue, then some sites are there. uh, it may take place at the ampulla fallopian tube, and it may take place in other part of the fallopian tube and other side of the uterus also. So you have to know that. And the twin pregnancy, you know there are two types of monozygotic and dizygotic twin. Here write about the dizygotic twin is come, so you have to know about that. So marks is only two, so write uh, specifically here. And next, write down the types of epiphyses and one type of each. We know there are epiphyses, there are several types of epiphyses, that pressure epiphyses, traction epiphyses, so like that. So you have to give example of that and use figure here, and classify the gland according to mood of secretion with one example of each. You know mode of secretion as holocrine, merocrine, and in that way, subsequent classifications are there. Actually, epithelial tissues, glandular tissues come from the epithelial tissue, and if we elaborate the epithelial tissue have individual classifications at covering epithelial classification and glandular epithelium classification. So you have to know about that. So actually, this come from the histology, general histology. And the last questions, that is 7, write short notes on. So question may come in that form, that is somite, that is segmental block of paraxial mesoderm. So if I see that there are three germ layers there, and ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm, so derivatives of three germ layers is very very important. And here only somite is given, and you have to give what are the parts of somite and derivatives of individual parts. And the next component is transitional epithelium. It's very important, where urine is there, their transitional epithelium is there. So it's a urine prof urothelium. So the structure, how it prevents urine absorptions. So you have to know the structure of transitional epithelium, and you have to must draw and label about that. And now the Haversian systems is the structural functional unit of the bone. So what are the components here? The lamina, lacunae, and central canal, Volkmann's canal. So bone cells, osteocytes, osteoblasts, osteoprogenital cells. So their locations and their connections and how they helps in nutrition passing. So this is important in here in Haversian systems. And the mark distributions here, 3 plus 2 plus 2. So time, by seeing time you write about that. So not read unnecessary details. So questions from the paper 1 group B, and here the questions come from already completed in third term, that is head neck card, central nervous system and eyeball card. So individual